There, art nerds, we are taking a look at another professional grade watercolor today. Today we're taking a look at MaiMeri Blu, an Italian brand of watercolors. Not only are we going to be taking a look at their test set, but we're also going to be taking a look at a few individual open stock tubes that I bought at my local brick and mortar. So I am really excited to talk about these with you guys today because it is part one of a three-part series. In part two, we're going to take a look at Jeannie and her collaboration with MaiMeri Blu, and in part three, we're going to take a look at Jeannie Dickson as well as her collaboration with MaiMeri Blu. So I am really excited to dive right into this with you guys, and I hope you guys are interested to find out how MaiMeri Blu watercolors unbox and swatch. Hello art nerds! Today I am back with another professional grade watercolor review. Today we're taking a look at the MaiMeri Blu watercolors. I have a test set here that I purchased from my local brick and mortar store, David's Art Supply in Metairie, Louisiana. And then I have some individual tubes just to kind of help round that out. This is actually part of a three-part review because I also have Jeannie's book and MaiMeri Blu collaboration to talk about with you guys in another video, and I have Jeannie Dickson's book and MaiMeri Blu collab to talk about in a follow-up video. So we're kind of doing this one first just to kind of set the standard, to look at what we're looking for with these watercolors, and just to talk about the quality of these professional grade watercolors in general. In the past, I have tried a few tubes of MaiMeri Blu. I believe I either got them from when there was a primary art supply store in Savannah before Blick and Utrecht came along. I think I picked up a few tubes from there. And generally my experience with MaiMeri Blu in the past has been quite good. I found them to be high quality watercolors with some beautiful colors, but also quite a bit expensive. So you guys can imagine how excited I am that one of my favorite art supply stores not only carries them, but carries them at a pretty decent price. So inside this small set here, we have 5 12 milliliter tubes, and inside the test set here, let's see if I can find where the colors are. I had to double check these when I was looking at the collaborations. So we have Cadmium Yellow Deep, Lake Quinacridone, Green Gold, Ultramarine Deep, and Payne's Gray. Then we also have Ultramarine Light, Cadmium Red Medium, Yellow Ochre, and Burnt Sienna. All right, so let's go ahead and get into the little test palette here. And I really love when companies do this, when they have like a small selection of mixing colors, just to see if you like the product or if you like the colors inside, just to kind of get an idea before you end up buying a larger set or you start buying it tube by tube. And a few companies do this, including PwC, and this is just such a more affordable way to get started with watercolor. Inside are our 5 12 milliliter tubes. MaiMeri Blu is made in Italy, and each tube has the light fast information, whether they are opaque, translucent, transparent, semi-opaque, and then over here it says grade 1, grade 3, so probably the color grade, I guess, or the series that it might be in. We have color numbers, and this says Cadmium Yellow Deep. Superior watercolors. Now, there we go. Our pigment information is written very, very small, so I hope you have good eyes. But Cadmium Yellow Deep, for example, is PY35, and then the ST, my best guess, would be that stands for staining. So what I want to do with you guys today is I want to swatch these from the tube. I want to do a little bit of color mixing, and then I want to set these up in the half pans and give them a chance to dry. But I'm actually going to do that kind of out of order. We're actually going to start by setting them up into half pans and just work from the wet half pans, then let them dry and re-swatch them. Now, at some point, I do want to add the Jenna Rainey MaiMeri Blu and the Jeannie Dickson to the palette here. So I have a 24 half pan Meeden Palette. These are fairly inexpensive. I like their new packaging. It is really fun. And inside is a bright and colorful metal watercolor palette, empty of course. And then inside that are our half pans. So we have 9 colors today. I'm gonna reorganize the color order just a little bit and start filling these half pans. As of today's review, we have Cadmium Yellow Deep, we have Cadmium Red Medium, we have Quinacridone Lake, we have Ultramarine Light, we have Ultramarine Deep, we have Green Gold, Yellow Ochre, Burnt Sienna, and Payne's Gray. So I was digging and I actually found a couple of older tubes, like 2010 of MaiMeri Blu. So they're a little bit different from the newer ones, but not so much that you wouldn't recognize them as being the same company. Something nice that the older ones have is they actually explain what's being used. So titanium dioxide, PW6, synthetic iron oxide, PY something with PR101. So that's actually pretty nice. And also the pigment information is printed a little bit larger, but these are 15 milliliter tubes, whereas these are 12 milliliter tubes. So they're a little bit smaller and they still have the GR1, GR2 sort of thing. One thing I noticed with these caps is they're so hard to get off, especially if they've dried on a little bit. I've tried a few different, like y'all have seen it, a few different cap removal tools and techniques. These, I usually have to get Joseph to help me out since I have hand problems, but I just thought I would show you guys and mention it, and I may end up including these 2 colors in this set because, well, I don't know, this one's almost all used up, but maybe I'll include the Naples Yellow Reddish. The colors we're taking a look at today are Cadmium Yellow Deep, Cadmium Red Medium, Quinacridone Lake, Ultramarine Light, Ultramarine Deep, Green Gold, Yellow Ochre, Burnt Sienna, Payne's Gray, and Naples Reddish Yellow. And I will have the pigment information, the transparency information, all of that for you guys in the show notes, so make sure you check the description. Something I noticed with the newer tubes is that there's a lot of very dark gum arabic in them, whereas with the older tube, it was really a very light color of binder, almost like Aquazol. So, and you would think, just given the age of this tube, 13 years, that the gum arabic would have yellowed, because I don't know about in a tube, but I know gum arabic does actually yellow as it's, as it is, what is the word? Exposed, almost said experienced, exposed to light, it yellows over time. So I wanted to point that out. I don't think it necessarily means anything, although I will say that very yellow gum arabic does have a tendency to make your blues and purple look a little bit dirtier than they would if they'd gone with a different binder for that. So now I am going to go ahead and pull out our swatch paper and we can get to swatching. We're going to be swatching on the same thing we do all of our swatches on, Pinky. We're going to be swatching on the Blick Premier Cold Press watercolor paper. This is a 100% cotton pre-stretched block of watercolor paper. I have no affiliation whatsoever with Blick. I happen to like this because it is relatively affordable in a world where cotton rag watercolor paper is increasingly expensive. Even this is getting pretty, oh boy, pricey. So if you like what I do and you want me to continue to do it, you know where to join me, patreon.com/natosoup, or you could convince Blick to sponsor me, but I don't think that's gonna happen. Anyway, I've done all of the student grade showdown on this, and I am moving all of my professional grade watercolors to this paper as well. It's a nice control. It's kind of a universal. I also like that it is pre-stretched. We're using a big sheet today, even though we only have 10 colors, because I am also going to swatch In subsequent videos, the Jenna Rainey and the Jeannie Dickson collaborations with MaiMeri Blu on this as well, so that they're all together. So boy, that ought to be super satisfying to watch. So what we're going to do is we are going to do a line of the fresh from the tube colors. We're going to do a little bit of color mixing, and I'm going to let them dry out for about 5 days, come back and see if they reactivate and see how they reswatch. Because when you're setting up tube watercolors, it's really important to make sure that if you dry them out in half pans, you can actually still use them, because believe it or not, even among professional watercolor brands, not all tubes and not all colors are made equally. In Maimari Blu, once you let it dry in your half pan, it's just clay, dry clay. So I want to make sure that we can actually get them to reactivate. We're going to consider these undried half pans to be swatched straight from the tube. And I found that these swatch fine, but they might be a bit more saturated after I let them dry for a week, because I'm trying to be really careful about not picking up and wasting too much paint, which is something I find I really struggle with when we're working with tube watercolors. I only use tube watercolors if I'm mixing up a huge batch of a wash. Usually I am working from dried half pans. So all the colors swatched just fine. The ultramarine light does feel kind of like a cobalt blue. Nothing really wrong with that. The ultramarine deep is more what I would expect from an ultramarine. I found it surprising that many of these colors are staining, but only one I think is granulating, and that would be the cadmium red medium, because when we think of ultramarines, we do typically think of granulating, and often when we think of Payne's gray, we think of granulating. So I'm going to do a little bit of color mixing, and then we will revisit these after they've had a chance to dry out for a while. The colors I have here aren't exactly a mixing set, so it wasn't easy to get most common mixes. I should have picked up a cool yellow. That would have given me a better idea of the range of mixes possible. That said, I have 2 more sets to unbox, so I may revise my thoughts by the Jeannie Dickson review. I am noticing some scaling in the burnt sienna and ultramarine mix, not quite granulation, but like white scales. Colors dry a little more desaturated than I'd like, but that also might be that the colors are neutralizing each other. It'll be interesting to see if and how my opinion changes as we go through the sets. So now I just need to wait and let these tube watercolors dry out a little bit and see how they reactivate. I'm going to do the lift test later on when I am testing out the dried tube paints, and I'm going to save the wet into wet test until we have looked at all 3 sets, because I want to use colors from all 3 of those sets, since this isn't quite the color gamut I had hoped. But honestly, that is on my fault, because I'm the one who bought the set and I'm the one who bought the open stock colors, so I have no one to blame but myself. I have kind of limited experience with MaiMeri Blu. It was available when I lived in Savannah. I believe Primary sold it, but Primary got bought out by Blick, and it ceased to be as commonly available. So like years ago I tried it and I thought it was super nice but very expensive, and then I just didn't have access to it. David's Art Center in Metairie now carries the tube, so if I like it, I can pick up some more. All right, so these schminke have had a week to dry. Some of them are, you can just ever so slightly push them in a little bit. That is fine. That is still set up enough that it wouldn't leak all over the place. So what I'm going to do is I am going to be as fair as possible. And we're going to reactivate these with just a drop of water and give it a chance to soak in for a little bit before we start swatching them down here on the second line. And I did already do a little bit of color mixing with these. I'm going to save the wet into wet test until I have unboxed the other two palettes that we've talked about. It's kind of looking like we're going to end this on a cliffhanger because there is a part 2 and there is a part 3. Okay, they've had about 10 seconds to soak in. So picking up a lot of color there. And I find working from dried half pans is just easier for me in terms of how I'm handling the color, how much color I'm picking up. They do seem, at least so far, you know, all of one swatch, they do seem to be a bit more saturated from the half pans, which is good. I was being very careful not to just pick up way too much color. So a thought about the MaiMeri Blu is these, if you let them dry, have a lot more color impact, a lot more color punch, and you're definitely going to want to work with a mixing surface, whether it is in the palette that you have or maybe with a ceramic palette. So, I mean, if you're a brush calligrapher, a brush letterer, a loose watercolor floral artist, you might want this kind of color payoff just right off the bat might be exactly what you're looking for. So in that case, letting them dry in half pans might be a great option. I am having a little bit of control with these because they do want to pick up so much paint. But so far I haven't noticed that they're turning soupy, kind of the way that the Magello half pan started to turn soup. Ooh, I don't know. This one picked up a lot more pigment than I might have wanted. So these might not really require a whole lot of pre-activation. Something else I'm really considering doing is doing the feel test after we have unboxed all 3 palettes. And that should give me enough colors to actually be able to do something with them. Because right now, I could probably, I'm missing some stuff. It would be a bit of a struggle. I would definitely have to be very careful about the illustration I selected to test this with, or maybe even make something custom for it. I probably could do something with it though, but you know, I have 2 more MaiMeri Blu sets. MaiMeri Blu, kind of challenging for me to say with my terrible Louisiana accent. Anyway, I have 2 more sets that I'm going to be looking at anyway, so I figure I might as well hold off some of the testing for that. Generally, I wouldn't buy an opaque color like this for a test, but it's a tube I already had, and I thought it would be fun to swatch for you guys since some people like this for skin tones. Colors didn't seem to shift significantly as they dried. I am going to let them dry 100% and then we're going to do the lift test. We are left with the lift test. So I'm going to use this flat, a little bit of clean water and a paper towel. We're just going to brush it, dab it, and see how much it lifts up. I'm going to save a lot of the testing, like the wet and wet test, the field test, making a color map for the palette, after I've had a chance to take a look at the other 2 MaiMeri Blu palettes. And that way I can kind of reassemble the color, and my opinions on this may change. So we're basically going to end on kind of a cliffhanger note where I'm not really super sure how I feel about these right now because I really need experience with more colors and I need to be able to test it out a little bit more thoroughly before I can tell you guys whether they are worth the money or not. I will say though that the test set I bought, and it's not necessarily fair to judge a brand by its test set, and I do love when brands do nice full-size test sets that you can get a good feel for what the paints are going to handle like and whether or not they're of the quality that you're looking for. I really, with the colors included in this test set, other than painting some flowers maybe, I don't really feel like I could judge the quality of these paints as a whole based on that. But I am going to do a field test where I will hopefully be able to talk about that with you guys. What I did notice is we have some interesting granulation. We have some very nice neutrals, and we have a lot of saturation going on when it's dried out in the half pan, but it tends to get a little bit soupy. They can be a little expensive in the US, and they can be a little bit harder to find. I do think David's has a pretty good price for these, but there was a point in time where I saw MaiMeri Blu going for like $20 a tube for the A series. That's how challenging they were to get a hold of. So, you know, times have changed, prices have shifted, but that still might be a consideration if you live in an area that maybe doesn't have a whole lot of artists, so you don't have a whole lot of art supply shops. You may have to search harder to find these. So here's the listing on Blick. I purchased mine, like I mentioned earlier, from my local brick and mortar, but Blick is pretty competitively priced and it's a pretty fair source. So you can try out the 90 card dot card, and this would let you see what colors you like from this if you just want to order specific colors. I purchased the introduction set of 5 assorted colors, 12 milliliter tubes. So as you guys can see, the color selection's a little bit weird in this set with a Cad Yellow Deep, a Quin Lake, a Green Gold, an Ultramarine Deep, and a Payne's Gray. There isn't necessarily like a good hot red in this set, nor are there like any neutrals like say a yellow ochre or a burnt sienna. So while you could mix a fair number of colors, you'd really have to know your color theory, and you'd have to experiment quite a bit, which could be a good way to figure out if you like these watercolors and if they're going to do for you what you want them to do for you, but it might also eat up quite a bit of time. They also have the Jenna Rainey colors. This is a set of 6, and this is going to be the next MaiMeri palette we're going to look at in this little mini series. So I'm not going to dive too much into it right now. MaiMeri Blu also makes gouache, oil, and then they also talk about their natural earth oil paints. So here is the dot card at $18.71. Here's the introductory set at $36.46, and I actually think David's was a little bit cheaper than Blick, which is impressive. And I purchased the Jenna Rainey colors off of Amazon. So as you guys can see, even for some of the less expensive colors, they're still pretty pricey. It seems to start at $13.21, which, and that's a chunk of money right there. And most of the colors seem to be in the $13.21, $17.65, or the $21.43 range. So these are fairly expensive watercolors to purchase open stock like this. So if you want to start painting with MaiMeri Blu, I do think your best bet is probably with the sets. I think, considering our cheapest is $13.21 and I paid $35 for 5 colors, the sets are definitely a bit of a better bargain than buying them open stock, which makes it kind of difficult for me to recommend these, because I don't know about you guys, but I am constantly buying refills open stock so I can refill my half pans, especially of colors that I really love. So the idea of plunking down $13 for a Series A or a Series 1 color is it's a little bit high for me, and might make these watercolors a little bit less appealing. Now, if you really like super bright saturated colors, you guys know I'm going to recommend that you give Core a try. And if you're looking for some just good all-rounder watercolors, Da Vinci watercolors are much more affordably priced, and they are just really good watercolors that I highly recommend. I don't have any kind of an affiliation with either company. That said, I would most certainly be open to an affiliation with either company, but these are just my own opinions based on my own experience painting both watercolor comics as well as watercolor illustrations. Here is their color chart, and I will try to remember to link this in the description for you guys in case you're curious. It has pigment information, it has what grade or what series it is, which would explain what, you know, why some colors cost what they cost. It also has the light fast information as well as the name in English. So, oh, and staining information as well. So if you're curious to learn more about individual colors, make sure you check the description below. I'll have this link there for you guys. These pros and cons aren't totally conclusive. We do still have 2 other sets to look at and a lot more testing to do before I can give you guys, you know, my definitive pros and cons as well as my definitive verdict. And as you guys know, as things change, as products change, as I change, sometimes my feelings on a product can change and develop over the years as well. So just because I give you guys a final verdict at the end of the series, it does not mean that isn't subject to change depending on availability and price changing. So my inconclusive pros and cons for this particular assortment of MaiMeri Blu colors are, let's start with the pros. We have some interesting granulation and color effects, and the binder isn't so dark that it really negatively affects the colors. However, we have a few cons. These are quite expensive, especially compared to some of the brands that you might be more familiar with, like Winsor & Newton and Core. These may not be a good choice for those of us who work with half pans, because I did notice that pre-activating them turned them fairly soupy and they had a tendency to glob up on the brush, which means you may be wasting palette in your water cup. The Ultramarine Deep is muddier when dried from the half pan than it is straight from the tube, which is pretty disappointing. And the Ultramarine Light is not only muddier, but it is also darker and far less vibrant. So as somebody who likes to work with her watercolors in half pans, it's just easier and more accessible for me and the kind of art that I make. Right now, I am not loving MaiMeri Blu as a whole. The price is pretty prohibitive for somebody who's painting thousands of tiny illustrations on hundreds of comic pages, and the way they handle in half pans is just not necessarily a good fit for me and the kind of art that I make. Speaking of the kind of art that I make, I now have signed artist prints available in the Natto shop. So if you enjoy my art, or if you fell in love with a piece during one of our tutorials, you can now own a signed art print. These were printed by Cat Print on their felt paper, and I think they did a beautiful job. In fact, many of these art prints are even prettier than the originals because I had an opportunity to adjust the colors just a little bit so that they look even better on your walls. You can find them in the Natto shop at nattosoup.com/shop. I have tons of adorable designs, so I hope you guys will head over there and check them out. So what do you guys think of these watercolors so far? Are they up to your expectations for $13 a tube open stock watercolors, or are there other brands that are both more affordable, more economical, and better able to serve your needs? Let me know down in the comments. If you're looking for more professional grade watercolor reviews, I've got you covered. I have an entire playlist. I will link that for you guys as well. If you are new here and you enjoyed today's review and you're interested in hearing what I have to say about Jenna Rainey and Jeannie Dickson, then make sure that you hit the subscribe button and click the bell notification so YouTube can let you know when I have another update in this ongoing series. I look forward to seeing you guys again soon, and I'm hoping that my opinions on MaiMeri Blu are able to shift as I'm able to swatch and explore more of the colors that they have on offer. So make sure you stay tuned for the other 2 reviews, as well as the probably upcoming field test. I hope you guys have a wonderful day, and I hope to see you guys again soon with another art supply review or tutorial. Bye guys!